Hey, it's Sean from the Commanders, bro. Hey, I'm real sorry about that clickbaity title. I'm not going to make you wait for it. The card is Faces of the Past. I do go into some detail about it, and I have a lot of other neat moves, so I hope you'll stick around. Maybe like and subscribe. This is Tatyova, Steward of Tides, and Darksteel Eric's here too. Oh, hey, Darksteel Eric here. Sean, great news. I licensed the rights to the song, The Macarena. We can use it as much as we want now. I don't see how we would use that, but more importantly, how much did that cost? $81,000. We're in a little bit of debt now. Gonna have to use it a lot to get our money's worth. Can you wait until the end? Sure. See you later. Tatyova, Steward of the Tides might seem like another Simic generic value commander, and it is. But there's enough different going on that I think this is pretty cool. Let's check her out. Tatyova, Steward of Tides, green, green, blue, legendary Merfolk Druid, 3/3. I don't need to read it all. Tatyova's a 3/3 for 3. I like a cheap commander. Makes him easy to cast a couple times. Obviously, to take advantage of the ability, we're going to want to ramp to 7 lands as fast as possible. Keep Tatyova around and attack with a huge army of flying lands. Seems pretty neat. I mean, we got green, so we got to get those 7 lands somehow, right? Here's my favorite play pattern for that. We're going to start with some major ramp spells. Almost all of those 2-mana ramp spells, because that's what we're going to do on 2. Rampant Growth, 3 visits, Farseek gets an island, Nature's Lore gets a forest, etc, etc. Into the north, if you don't mind chilling out for all of the snow lands. And Edge of Autumn is fine. It really works best at the beginning, but we want that redundancy. I'm not putting a lot of mana dorks or mana rocks. Sol Ring, of course. Even an emergent sequence is nice because it makes it into a creature land already, which we'll get flying with Tatyova even before we hit 7 lands. And plus with that +1/+1 counter, when it becomes a 3/3 later, it'll actually be a 4/4. So here's the first few turns. So in your second turn, you go to 3 lands. And then in your third turn, you play your 4th land, and then you hit something like Explosive Vegetation or Migration Path. Even Nissa's Expedition puts 2 lands out onto the battlefield, and you can convoke it with something. I do appreciate the irony of convoking a spell using land creatures. And I think I'm willing to run something like Boundless Realms to just dump out a ton of lands at once and make a ton of flying lands at the same time. I think Harvest Season is excellent in this deck. I've always loved this card. Since a lot of our lands will be creatures, we can just tap all of them for mana, cast this, and put at least 3 or 4 lands onto the battlefield. Not bad for 3 mana. And I want to highlight Sporocyst here for a second. We will be getting a ton of mana, so we would be able to use a card like this to put quite a few lands in at the same time. But mainly this is just here to tease the Warhammer 40k episode that's coming next week. Stay tuned. I'm going to do a quick take on all of the legendaries from there. And they are spicy. And so we've got a whole bunch of flying lands. And what do we do with them? We can use all the non-creature lands to cast a Biomass Mutation to make them all pretty big. Or a simple Beastmaster Ascension. As long as we attack with 7 or more, we're just going to make them all into 8/8 flying lands. Don't need too many of them to kill players. Ooh, I think I got a case of the Simics. I want more mana. Let's run Nissa, who shakes the world, making all of our forests tap for double green. And if we can get to that emblem with the ultimate, that's going to be pretty good for us. It is a bit scary to have all your creatures be lands, but if we can make sure that they can't be destroyed, that's a bonus. Hard to believe this is only $5 too. I thought this would cost more. We should be able to get enough mana to put Zendikar Resurgent onto the battlefield. I'm not planning on casting too many creature spells, but I would like to tap my land for double. And the classic Leyline of Abundance. We can even get this for free if it's in our opening hand, but all your creatures tap for mana with an additional green, which means all of our lands that are creatures tap for double green. Now you might be thinking, but I don't want to use my creatures for double mana. I would like to be attacking with them, right? I got you covered. Now we're looking to run cards like Turnabout. The target player is us and the type is land, so we will untap all of our lands. And then once we get going, cards like Benefactor's Drought work well too, because when it says untap all creatures, a lot of ours will be lands, so that's another way to get a bunch more mana. You know, Benefactor's Drought is always been a little bit expensive. It's $10 as the time of this recording, and for that reason, it's always made me think of Heroic Intervention, which is also very expensive. It's $15. When did it get to $15? They reprint this thing all the time. Come on, Wizards. If we are doubling a bunch of mana, we can actually profit mana by using Reality Storm to target our lands and untap them. And a couple of creatures while we're at it. But you get the picture, right? We're going to play a lot of lands. Tatyova's going to be out, and we're just going to ramp as hard as we can and start doubling our mana so that when we play these untap spells, we're actually profiting a lot of mana. we're hoping to get some major mana in our mana pool. So what are we doing with it? I'll get to it. First, we're going to cast something like Blue Sun Zenith, maybe a pull from tomorrow, something like that. Even the score is basically a Blue Sun Zenith. I mean, you can't target opponents, but it's still something. I don't predict we'll be able to cast it for the reduced cost, but maybe. And we're going to make X as big as possible while leaving a little bit of mana left over, because we want to draw something like a turnabout, something like that to untap all of our lands, repeat the process, only now we've got a huge hand and we can find those other untappers or other draw spells. Then maybe we throw in a Diviner's Portent to make X equal whatever, but this time with a huge hand, we should definitely scry X and draw X. That's a way to guarantee you're going to find whatever you're looking for, which is more untappers. If a lot of our lands are creatures, then Vitalize is a single mana way to untap all of them. Mobilize, same deal, only this one's sorcery. An Early Harvest costs 3, but again, this time it doesn't matter if they're creatures. We untap all of our basic lands we control. And I think a lot of our mana base will be basics because we're just ramping for them so much. We do that once or twice, cast a big X spell, find an untapper, which lets us do it all over again. I can envision a game where we get to the point where we're able to untap with tons of cards in our hand and just do whatever we need to close the game. Ooh. The Simic fever is getting to me. I think I want even more mana. Okay, here's the card I meant when I made that clickbaity title. I'm sorry for doing that. Faces of the Past. Let me paint this picture for you. Whenever a creature dies, you either tap or untap all tapped creatures that share a creature type with it. Once we have a ton of lands that are creatures, one land goes to the graveyard, we untap all of the other tapped lands, aka land creatures, sacrifice another one, untap the rest. Sacrifice another one, untap the rest. If we're able to double, that's even crazier, but we're going to be able to put so much mana in our mana pool this way. And as long as we find something like a Zuran Orb, which is free to put on the battlefield and free to sacrifice lands, that's going to be the fuel for Faces of the Past. And if we can also get down to Perilous Forays, we can pay 1 with the land that we'll be sacrificing as the creature, search for a new land, put it into play tapped, but it'll also get untapped with Faces of the Past, and we'll just keep cycling this through. We could end up with near infinite mana. I mean, is there such thing as near infinity? I don't know. For practical purposes, it's a ton of mana. I believe the technical term is boatload. So maybe we drop a Renin 7 and use the ability to put all of our land cards from our hand onto the battlefield tapped, which will certainly turn any remaining lands into creatures. And if that's not enough to finish the game, maybe we cast an X spell in Genesis Wave before we untap. Lands count as 0 mana permanent, so we do get to put those onto the battlefield. And if you're a millionaire, why not just run Finale of Devastation? It's $50, but if X is 10 or more, you basically win the game. It's kind of like Craterhoof that way. So that's a fun way to go to get a whole bunch of mana. It feels very appropriately Simic to me. Hey, me again, Darksteel Eric, just reminding you to like and subscribe. It really helps out Darksteel Industries. And now, 2 ads, 1 fake, 1 real. Do you have little kids? They're gonna love the Darksteel Industries children's album by the Phyrexian 5. With the classic song, I Like to Compleot, Eoples, and Bnianias. And other hits like... Order now to get all these songs on 7 cassettes or 4 CDs. And now, the real ad from the Wizard's Tower, wizardtower.com. A super fun website where you can get all sorts of great articles and stick texts. And if you're watching us from Canada, you can use coupon code BREWUNITED to get 5% off your Magic singles. As long as you spend $20 or more, ask your parents for $20. And now, back to the show. Okay, I want to highlight a special creature that belongs in this deck, Yedora, Grave Gardener. This is another way to ensure that most of our land creatures should remain on the battlefield. If one of our non-token land creatures dies, we return it to the battlefield face down as a forest land. And that's another ETB for Tatyova. But the cool thing with Yedora is that if we want to spring for something like Yavimaya, Cradle of Growth, then whenever we play the Streets of New Capenna fetch lands, like the Cabaretti Courtyard type of ones, the ones that sack themselves automatically, the Courtyard enters the battlefield, its trigger and Tatyova's trigger go on the stack at the same time. We order it so Tatyova turns this into a creature before it sacks itself. Yedora brings this back to the game face down as a forest, and we still get to find that forest from our deck that the courtyard wanted to look for in the first place. And if we have Yavimaya out, we could have tapped it for a green before the thing even went to the graveyard. That's a neat move. So if you think Yedora is crucial to your game plan, I think there's an interesting strategy in looking for neoform type of effects. There's enough effects that let you sacrifice a creature and find something that costs 1 more. And since Yedora costs 5, we want some decent 4-drops. And there just so happens to be plenty of useful ones. Solemn Simulacrum is a classic that fits the game plan nicely, and since we've got a lot of key untapping spells, I think Archaeomancer also fits. And once Archaeomancer has done their job and brought that spell back to our hand, I'm happy to turn this into a Yedora. Even something like Timeless Witness, which would be a little bit of a downgrade from Eternal Witness on the front because it costs 4 instead of 3. 4 is the magic number in this case if we want to neoform it. And just in case we already get Yedora, we don't want that neoform to be dead, so we want to put 1 mana creatures in the deck that we can sack our lands, which are 0-drops, to go find. Elvish Reclaimer is almost up to $10, but it's worth it because it looks for any land, not just a basic. And Sylvan Safekeeper is $15. Woof. We should have enough lands out that sacrificing 1 to give Tatyova Shroud shouldn't be too big of a deal. So the deck is largely basics because that's how we're going to be fetching for things. Probably heavier on the green side, but it shouldn't matter much. As long as we have a forest in our opening hand and some ramp, we should easily be able to get as many forests and islands as we need. But since we're untapping lands, we are interested in lands that can tap for more than 1 mana. So get a load of this. Baldur's Gate. It can tap for multiple mana, but we do have to pay a little bit of mana to make it happen, and we have to have at least 3 other gates for this to start profiting mana. But there just so happens to be tons of gates now in a 2-color deck. You got your Simic Guild Gate, your classic. Now we have Sea Gate and Manor Gate, which both function as Simic Guild Gates in the deck. Keep Gate's colorless, but it lets us make treasures if we got nothing better to do. And Gone just makes all of our other gates nicer because they come into play untapped. We've got access to cards like Crop Rotation that let us pick specific lands, not just basics. So maybe we start with a Baldur's Gate or a Gone Gate and just work our way up from there. We've got Open the Gates that searches for a gate, puts it in our hand. Circuitous Route puts 2 lands or gates right onto the battlefield tapped. It really shouldn't be a problem so that Baldur's Gate is untapping for a lot of mana. Hour of Promise, yet again. We're not going to make those zombies, but we're going to get 2 more gates this way. And the classic way to trade in a bunch of cards for a bunch of other specific lands is Scapeshift. You sack the boring ones, you turn them into the interesting ones. There's 9 gates in a 2-color deck. 9 gates. 1 less than 10. Maze's End asks us to find a 10th gate, return this to its owner's hand, and if we do have that 10th differently named gate, we will win the game. But there's just 9. You can't thespian stage a gate because it'll have the same name. That's how the copy works. Unless we have Sakashima the Imposter come into play as a creature in play. That creature can be any one of our gates that was turned into a creature, except its name is still Sakashima and it has the same types. This is our 10th gate. Is this a Maze's End deck? I think so. I think I want to do Maze's End in a 2-color deck. Whew, that's a new personal goal of mine. I'm building this deck and I want to get Maze's End victory off of a 2-color deck. Had a lot of fun brewing this one in the Discord. Thanks to everyone in there. Find out how to join in by going to patreon.com/commandersbrew. And in the meantime, you keep being you. The world is a better place for it. I'll see you next time. Right, here we go. Macarena. Chippa chappa chappa, Macarena. This isn't the Macarena. Di-da-da, Macarena. Macarena do-do-da. $1,000. Macarena. Oopa-da-boo-dooba. Macarena. Do-do-do, do-do-do-do. Ooh-ooh-ooh. Macarena. Ooh-ah, ooh-ooh-ah. Do-do-do-do-do. Macarena. This is fun. Why aren't you joining in? Ooh-ah. Macarena.